Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the meeting. Membership of the subcommittee. Any apologies absent? I've got apology for Councillor Nosheen Dad and Gwen Lowe. Anybody else?
Also from Councillor Lunat and Councillor Kath Taylor.
Anybody else? No? Thank you. Let's see. Yes. Minutes of the previous meeting. Can I have approval show of hands, please? Yeah. Thank you. Declaration of interest and lobbying. I'll start by myself. Firth Yard 2021 92771. And Emily Huddersfield 2021 93286. And Footbridge Bartley 2021 93311. Councillor Steve Hall.
2021 93286 will be by many.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Ramsey.
Lobbied by many, and double 311, lobbied by all no actions.
Thank you. Councillor Pervez.
Somebody else?
All right, okay. Okay. You settle yourself. Councillor Sheard.
Lobbied by multiple residents on application number 93286. No advice given.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen.
2021 93286. Again, lobbied by many and no advice given.
Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Chair. Lobbied on item number 13, application number 2021 93286. No advice given. Thank you.
Councillor Pinnock.
Thank you, Chair. Item 13, numerous communications noted.
Thank you. Councillor Lawson.
Item 11, just a conversation with the applicant, no action taken or advice given. And item 13, as everybody else, lobbied by numerous, no action taken.
Thank you. Back to you, Councillor Pervez.
Yeah, item 13, no action taken.
Thank you. Admission of the public. Yes, that's yes. Deputations or petitions?
None, Chair.
No. We've done a site visit this morning on Firth Yard and also at 3 Shirley Villas. We've done a site visit this morning. So we'll move on to the first application, which is 2021 93311. And do you want to?
Let his officer do the presentation.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, members. I'm Richard. Now broach the new information submissions following the application's deferral at the previous meeting. However, by way of a verbal update, I'd just like to make you aware that as the case officer, I received a further representation on the application yesterday from Councillor Zaman, who was forwarding the comments on from a local resident, Mr. Tariq Butt. These comments have been logged, but they have not been able to be made available online due to the short time frame in which they've been received. However, I'll pass myself on to my colleague, Andrea Woodside here, who will just read out Councillor Lunat's representation. Apologies, Councillor Zaman.
The comments submitted by Councillor Zaman are that I am supporting the objections the residents are putting forward at the meeting.
I would like assurance that any recommendations put forward by this committee today will be followed up appropriately and monitored by Network Rail so that they do not cause issues for the residents in this area, creating further work for the council and councillors. I would also request the design and location of the footbridge to be reviewed so that it does not cause issues or concerns to Mr. Butt and his young family, as the current structure is at the front of Mr. Butt's house, allowing little or no privacy. I would also like reassurance and a formal written agreement with Mr. Butt and Network Rail that they will ensure the land adjoining his property is well maintained at all times, and Mr. Butt is not having to go through the legal route to ensure that works are carried out. Network Rail have been in discussion with Mr. Butt, why have no formal agreements been drawn up. The whole process has been shortcut with no real consideration for the residents. For the residents or the long-term implications for this community. Thank you.
To recap on the proposal, the application site is situated approximately 900 metres to the north of Batley Station. The proposed development crosses over the Manchester-Leeds line and is at the same location as the disused Batley to Bradford railway line that formerly crossed over the Transpennine route. This latter railway track was closed in 1964, with only the abutments remaining, though a bridge would have crossed behind the location of the existing signal box serving the Lady Anne level crossing. The crossing currently provides pedestrian access over the line from Rutland Road in the west to Howley Street and Primrose Hill in the east. The Lady Anne level crossing is a part of a public right-of-way which connects the area and is for pedestrian access only. The diversion of the prow is covered under a separate Section 257 application to divert the right-of-way over the proposed footbridge, which is the next item on the agenda today. In terms of the wider context, the southeastern boundary of the Upper Batley Conservation Area runs adjacent to the western side of the railway corridor along Rutland Road, as set out by the area in blue on the slide. There are further residential properties on both Howley Street and Primrose Hill to the north and east of the abutment. The area outlined in orange on the slide presents the site area for housing allocation HS74. This site has an indicative capacity for 97 dwellings. This slide presents an artist's impression of the footbridge and its access viewed from the northeast, with the street forming Primrose Hill on the left-hand side and Rutland Road and the wider Upper Batley Conservation Area on the right-hand side. As members can see, the bridge is a relatively utilitarian structure that enables an alternative form of crossing the track through grade separation. This slide presents a further 3D render encapsulating the anticipated view of the footbridge from the eastern landing. The ramped access is set on the left, the entrance to the bridge in the centre, and the staircase down the abutment on the right-hand side of the image. The application is resubmitted to Heavy Woollen Committee today, following a decision to defer the application at the previous meeting last month on the 17th of March 2022. The member resolutions from that meeting were to seek a report from West Yorkshire Police to verify that their views accord with those of the British Transport Police, and for the applicant to provide an agreed artificial lighting scheme for the footpath to ensure that this element of public safety had been thought through prior to a member decision. Both of the member resolutions have been satisfied, and therefore the application is able to be considered once more by the committee. The West Yorkshire Police response has been available in full on both the application webpage and in the updated officer report, specifically section 10.58, and this has been reiterated in the response to Councillor Zaman last week, as evidenced in the committee update. The slide before you provides some of the written extracts from the West Yorkshire Police response to example the consultee's satisfaction with the development's crime prevention credentials. The Designing Out Crime Officer, Richard Thornton of West Yorkshire Police, is also in attendance today and will be able to provide a short summary of West Yorkshire Police's stance toward the development following my presentation. I'll allow a moment for members to consider the quotations on the slide. In respect of the footpath lighting scheme, this has been negotiated in the 6-week interval between this committee meeting and the previous committee meeting. The agreed scheme relates purely to the design specification of the artificial lighting so that it accords with Kirklees Highway Authority standards, which would enable it to be adopted. The design has taken into consideration the practicalities of maintaining the infrastructure and the appropriate illumination of the footpath, but it does not represent the legal act of adopting the infrastructure, which is to be conducted through the Section 257 diversion order application. The plan on this slide presents the draft lighting layout available on the website. It may be difficult to make out the lighting column locations, but these are the red dots set at intervals along the footpath. This 3D visualization is also for illustrative purposes, but members should be able to make out the lighting column and lantern locations. This lighting design has been agreed in principle with KC Street Lighting. The previous plan and the visualization do not reflect the final agreed design, but it's agreed in principle. The final visualization is being calculated by Network Rail. Nevertheless, as cited in the committee update, the final outstanding matters relating to agreement on the lighting design have been overcome, and therefore the agreed design will be listed on the approved plan and documentation list should members be minded to approve the application. Lastly, members should note that the heightened lighting level on the bridge is reflective of Network Rail standards, as the bridge will be maintained by Network Rail and does not fall under the lit area that is to be adopted by the Highway Authority, and as this is restricted to the footpath only. Thank you. I'll now pass you over to Richard Thornton from West Yorkshire Police.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members. My name is Richard Thornton, Designing Out Crime Officer for the Kirklees District with West Yorkshire Police. This application was referred to me by Richard Gilbert, the Planning Officer. I've done some significant work on this. I must say from the outset that West Yorkshire Police do not take primacy on this application. It's a Network Rail application, therefore British Transport Police take primacy for the policing of it. I have worked closely with my colleague and counterpart in British Transport Police, whereby we've gained the crime statistics and we've agreed the safety and security standards for this particular application. British Transport Police have reported there being 3 reported incidents of trespass and verbal abuse of Network Rail staff over the past 12-month period. West Yorkshire Police show 16 recorded incidents, and those are within the surrounding streets, most of which relate to domestic offences, with a small number being a variety of other small offences and none relating to the railway itself. So we've, as far as West Yorkshire Police are concerned, we've no issues with this particular application. The bridge design itself has been discussed at length and conforms to the normal Network Rail design standards, which includes crime prevention measures and also anti-suicide measures. So we're confident that this will be a good quality development, really. As I said, from a West Yorkshire Police perspective, we can't foresee any particular issues with this. If the members have got any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
No, there's no questions from me. Anybody? No? That's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have Tim Hill, please?
Chair, members, good afternoon. There comes a point in any debates when the key issues become simply a matter of opinion. You're never going to convince me that putting 300 metres and a bridge of steelwork into a conservation area is going to have a negligible impact, as the latest report claims. We now have the West Yorkshire Police report. We'd all agree that a bridge will always be a safer way of crossing over, getting over a railway line than a crossing. Our concern all along has always been that that's one very narrow aspect of what it's all about, and the real safety issues are being now transferred from Network Rail to the residents, because the residents are going to have all the concerns of dealing with crime, antisocial behaviour, and particularly fear of crime. You can put in as many mitigating features as you like, but the plain fact is that we're only going to know in 12 months' time whether it's been successful or not. What we do know now is that there are some residents have a very real fear of crime. If you can imagine yourself at the foot of these ramps, you've got a 200-yard incline ahead of you, and you see a group of youths loitering at the end of it. Now, don't tell me these people don't exist, because they do exist. They're already started to gather to see what Network Rail are up to. So if you're disabled, wheelchair, unaccompanied children, elderly person, are you going to continue with your journey? A lot of residents have already made their mind up on that, and the answer is no, they're not. Electrification. Shortly after the last meeting, we finally received our Freedom of Information request replies on the question of electrification. Now, if you remember, electrification has been at the front of Network Rail's campaign, and they claim that they can't possibly create a safe crossing with the prospect of 25,000 volts crashing down on people's heads. Now, we're surprised to find in one of our questions that their answer is that there are, in fact, a great many, I quote from the Freedom of Information request reply, a great many pedestrian crossings over electrified lines. There are so many, in fact, that they can't tell us how many there are. So I don't see that having one more makes a great deal of difference. Electrification, incidentally, isn't now planned until 2027, and that is, quotes, subject to some uncertainty in their reply. So we don't understand where all the urgency about electrification has gone. And we've always thought this is really about getting the re-signalling done. It's got nothing to do with electrification. Finally, I've also never understood why the financial interests of big business are being preferred over local residents. The critical para 1110D commercial justification tests rests entirely on the figure of £10 million, which is the figure supplied by Network Rail. And when I put in a freedom of information request and say, where do you get that from? They can't tell me. They have no justification for it. It's a complete piece of guesswork. If this is voted through, our biggest concern will remain that the preconditions are not monitored and adequately met. All the previous reports from Network Rail have been long on assertions and wishful thinking and short on facts and delivery. We were described by Network Rail at the last meeting as broken eggs to make their omelette. We have no confidence at all that they will make good on any of their promises. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for that. Can we have Phil Midhurst, please?
I'm not used to public speaking. My name is Phil Middlehurst and I live on Lutton Road, in fact, opposite where the bridge is. At the last planning meeting, we believe it was stated as a condition for Network Rail to improve relationships with the residents of Lutton Road. This has not even been attempted and no contact has been made, but to the contrary, works have been carried out for Network Rail without informing the residents during this period. Throughout our dealings with Network Rail, regarding this application, we have been the ones pushing for meetings and information. They have not been consistent with their answers to our questions, and of course a climate of distrust. This level crossing is well used and is the only safe crossing point out of 4 between Suthill Lane and Scotsman's Lane. 2 of these crossings are tunnels, which are not particularly user-friendly or well lit in daytime and are unsafe in the hours of darkness. You get lots of ewes hanging around them occasions. The third is a footbridge, which is out in the middle of nowhere and has restricted access on the west side. Therefore, this level crossing at the moment is the only safe and regularly used crossing point during the hours of darkness. And if you divert this crossing with a bridge and wide footpath, we believe you will create a much longer and risky situation. This will especially affect school children from Primrose Hill and the Suthill Estate, who regularly use the crossing during the hours of darkness in the winter. As we have previously expressed our concerns, the existing 20-metre crossing is used only by pedestrians, and now it is intended to be replaced by a bridge and footpath, long footpath, which can be used by horses, motorbikes, e-bikes, bicycles and skateboards, which will be a danger to all users. You can put as many signs up as you want. You won't stop this situation. People try to go through the crossing at the moment on these horses. And with regard to antisocial behaviour, since the last meeting, Network Rail have been doing works on the embankment. And we have cited on 2 occasions 3 to 4 juveniles on the embankment by the existing crossing. And there has been drug dealing outside our house on Lutton Road. That's not Network Rail's fault, but this bridge may attract that. The finances of Network Rail are receiving favour against the safety of your constituents. At the last meeting, it was mentioned that it is important that the rail network is not hindered by such crossings.
30 seconds.
The crossing doesn't open if a train comes along. The trains take preference, so it will never hinder them. In conclusion, a footpath is usually diverted to increase safety rather than reduce it. Please consider this in your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony DeVito.
Tony Rivero, Town Planning Manager for Network Rail. Following Deferment of the application at the last Heavy Woollen subcommittee, where members wish to see more detail on, in particular, a lighting scheme, as well as further information on the response from the West Yorkshire Police. We have worked with your officers to provide this extra detail. A lighting scheme has been agreed with the Highways Department to the council specification, and a commuted sum will be paid by Network Rail to the council for ongoing maintenance. You have already heard from the West Yorkshire Police confirming that the level of crime around the Rutland Road area is extremely low. I'll repeat what I said at the previous committee, that you cannot assume that crime will increase simply because a new bridge structure has been put in place. However, we have agreed to the imposition of conditions which will provide further crime reduction measures if it is indeed the case the bridge is a cause of significant increase in crime. We consider that the police have looked at the case thoroughly, and as stated by their spokesman, they have no further comments to add to their comprehensive report tabled previously. It was also mentioned at the last committee that Network Rail should seek to repair its relationship with residents, particularly on Rutland Road, and this we pledge to do so going forward, including up-to-date information on the progress of the scheme, should it be successfully granted permission. May I remind you that we have provided at least 3 separate online and face-to-face consultations with the general public since the summer of 2020, modifying the scheme to meet some of the concerns expressed at the original event, with follow-up meetings, including ones as recently as February and March this year, explaining our position. We feel we have carried out a thorough consultation with residents, and it seems the waters have been somewhat muddied by requests under the Freedom of Information Act, which have no strict bearing on the planning merits of the scheme before you, as they mainly cover the topic of electrification and closure of the level crossing. However, going forward in a spirit of cooperation, there has to be compromise on both sides, and it is distressing to report that our staff have recently been intimidated and harassed by locals whilst going about their lawful activities, and this is unacceptable. We ask that this scheme is supported through the grant of planning permission on the basis that it is the key to unlock significant investment in a modern, safe and sustainable railway in Kirklees, delivering the full benefits of the upgrade and to meet the policy aspirations contained in the local plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Members? Councillor Pinnock.
Thank you, Chair. Whatever the merits or demerits of putting a bridge instead of a level crossing are, we have an application in front of us which specifies a bridge. And in the spirit of that, I want to touch on 1 or 2 points. And one of the things I noticed about the conditions relating to this application is that there are 9 pre-commencement conditions. And this means that what it says in those conditions have to be agreed with the planning authority before work starts on site. I emphasise those words because as Mr. Gilbert knows, I and he have been dealing with an issue on a different site in relation to this very subject. It does seem to me that if, and I have no reason to doubt that Network Rail will comply with these pre-commencement conditions, residents should be assured that these pre-commencement conditions will be agreed before work starts on site, so that they can see what it is that those conditions actually cover. And of course, officers would tell you that these pre-commencement conditions have to be discharged before work can take place. But can I also refer to condition 3, which is the construction management plan pre-commencement should include some words about involving the local residents in the activities that need to take place on this site. This is very important because in too many cases a bad relationship develops between a developer and the local residents when development is taking place. I do not want that to happen, and I'm sure colleagues on this committee do not want that to happen. That is creating unnecessary tension and bad feeling when actually what is being done is something that will produce an all-round improvement, or should produce an all-round improvement. And you know, this is all very important. It sounds very technical and dry, but if one deals with all of these things that are set out here in the proper way, and the developer does them in the proper order and gets agreement for them, then and involves the local residents properly, not just paying lip service to it, then I would be quite happy to move approval of this application. Can I just make a plea, however, that Mr. Gilbert mentioned the utilitarian nature of the bridge. I don't quite know what he meant by that, but it does seem to me that it is possible to design such bridges so that they do not look utilitarian, and it might not even cost very much more to put some design features into it. Maybe even a question of how it's painted, with a design of some sort, so that it does actually look moderately attractive, rather than utilitarian. Which yes, well, there you are. You see, I think a bit of colour might be helpful. Anyway, I'll shut up now. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. So just in response to Councillor Pinnock's points, first in terms of local engagement, the final bullet point of the construction management plan, which is under condition 3, does require the construction management plan to outline methods for local engagement and how that would be managed throughout the construction process. So that is covered as a part of that. In terms of the comments on the utilitarian structure, it was in terms of that, it's a bridge that serves a purpose as being a bridge, and that its design is kind of reflective of that. The colour of the bridge is informed by the backdrop of the abutment, which is largely green, and I think it's Network Rail might correct me, but I think it's something like holly green or something. Or it's the RAL colour for that. That is for that, and that's the reasoning for it. So just to kind of provide some explanation there.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ramsey.
Thank you very much, Chair. It was really clear at the last meeting that residents spoke very much about their fear of antisocial behaviour, and we asked around the lighting, and we asked around the crime prevention expertise, and to me it feels as though both of those have been provided for us, and so we have got some assurance that there has been the prevention of antisocial behaviour has been considered as seriously as it possibly can by this committee. So I would be happy to second your motion.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Can we go to the vote, please?
Okay, so the vote is to delegate 2 officers to approve the application. Councillor Hall, Councillor Ramsey.
4.
Councillor Pervez.
4.
Councillor Sheard.
4.
Councillor Stephen.
4.
Councillor Gregg. 4. Councillor Pinnock.
4.
Councillor Lawson.
4.
Councillor Hussain.
4.
Okay, so that's unanimous.
That's carried. So the next application, Footpath.
Good afternoon, Chair, members. For those who don't meet, my name is Phil Champion. I'm one of the definitive map officers in the Council's Public Rights of Way team. I'm going to apologise for any degree of repetition from the previous item. But this item is consideration of an application from Network Rail for an order under Section 257 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 to divert part of public footpath Batley 20, which crosses the railway line at the level crossing. I'll start with a brief update. We've had a representation from a local resident that was received yesterday objecting to the proposal, very much in similar terms to previous objections received at our informal consultation stage. Also, further to the report, as you've heard, we've now agreed appropriate lighting scheme for the footpath. So, as I think you'll be well aware by now, it's proposed that the public footpath is diverted via the new footbridge, which is to be constructed just over 100 metres south of the existing level crossing, as shown on the plan. Excuse me. Bear with me. It's Network Rail's stated aim to achieve the closure of the level crossing. It's their policy to seek removal of level crossings wherever possible for safety reasons. However, this particular proposal is made in connection with the Transpennine route upgrade project. This includes electrification of the line and introduction of faster, longer and more frequent trains. As part of the TRU programme, the signalling is to be modernised. The Batley signal box will be closed and signalling will be controlled from a signalling centre at York. That would affect future operation of the level crossing and the level of risk to users and to the railway in general. However, the proposed changes to the operation of the railway would not themselves necessitate the stopping up or diversion of the public rights of way via an order made under Section 257. An order would be required to fully implement the planning permission granted this afternoon. The route proposed to be stopped up is the bold solid line on the plan between points A and B, and the new routes to be created are shown by the bold dashed line between points B and F via a ramped path and via points G, C, H and E with additional steps between points C and D. This connects with the footbridge between points E and F and its junction with Rutland Road. These photographs show the west and east sides of the level crossing. The public footpath runs via the narrow metal gates rather than the white vehicle gates, which relate to a separate private vehicular crossing. This photo shows the gate on the east side of the crossing. This is a manned gated crossing currently controlled from the nearby signal box. The heavy metal gates are electrically unlocked by the signaller when it's deemed safe for pedestrians to use the crossing. These gates impact on the accessibility of the route, e.g. for disabled users, people with pushchairs and prams, etc. However, there are no steps or significant gradients to be negotiated. There is also a degree of risk associated with the use of the level crossing, although it's currently mitigated by the crossing being manned and only available for use when deemed safe by the signaller. This is a view you may have seen before along the proposed path from point B towards point C and the footbridge. And here we have the view of the bridge at the top of the steps. As again, another view showing the bridge and the ramped path and steps. The lamp columns that have been agreed are not shown in this, but they will be provided. And there is the illustration of the whole general area. And finally, we have some views along Rutland Road, which connects the current and the proposed termination points of the footpath. The footpath will be reached by a ramped, the footbridge would be reached by a ramped footpath approximately 200 metres in length. The ramps are proposed to be 2.15 metres wide with a gradient of 1 in 15. The ramps would have 2.15 metre long landings for every 5 metres of ramp. The first approximately 44 metres of the ramp from Howley Street at point B would have a gradient of 1 in 30. The footbridge would have solid parapets and a non-slip surface bonded to the bridge structure. A set of steps is also to be provided between point C and D. There will be no steps or ramps on the west side at point F. We should have level access from the footway on Rutland Road. The specification proposed for the replacement path is considered acceptable. The current design utilises an existing disused railway embankment to provide support for a ramped path and steps in order to reach the deck of the proposed bridge, rather than requiring structural steel elements. Network Rail have agreed to provide and maintain lighting on the bridge itself. Lighting of the path and steps will be in accordance with council specifications as described in the previous planning item and will be adopted by the council. To fully implement the planning permission, it will be necessary to stop up the public right-of-way passing over the level crossing. This relates specifically to the proposed construction of the wall in place of level crossing gates on the west side of the crossing. Planning permission having been required as it's on the boundary of the Upper Batley Conservation Area. It's not necessary to stop up the public right-of-way to construct the proposed footbridge itself. The public pedestrian level crossing is adjacent to a private vehicular crossing. The proposed diversion of the public footpath would not itself affect any private rights that exist. Removal of such private rights is a matter for Network Rail and the rights holders to resolve separately. The tests under 257, section 257 gives authority for the power, gives an authority the power to make orders to divert public footpaths, bridleways or restricted byways if it's satisfied that relevant criteria are satisfied. The council may make an order to confirm the council may make and confirm a diversion order under section 257 if it considers that it's expedient to do so, when it is necessary to do so in order to enable development to be carried out in accordance with planning permission granted. And the council must also take into account the suitability of the proposal and the effect the change would have on those entitled to the rights that would be extinguished. DEFRA Public Rights of Way Circular 109 includes guidance on changes to the public rights of way network. Paragraph 7.15 of the circular states, the local planning authority should not question the merits of planning permission when considering whether to make or confirm an order, but nor should they make an order purely on the grounds that planning permission has been granted. That planning permission has been granted does not mean that the public right-of-way will therefore automatically be diverted or stopped up. Having granted planning permission for a development affecting a right-of-way, however, an authority must have good reasons to justify a decision either not to make or not confirm an order. The disadvantages or loss likely to arise as the result of the stopping up or diversion of a way to members of the public generally, or to persons whose properties adjoin or are near to the existing highway, should be weighed against the advantages of the proposed order. In addition, when considering whether or not to confirm an order, the authority, or the Secretary of State, if it's an opposed order, would need to take into account any significant disadvantages or losses the stopping up of the path would cause to the general public or other individuals whose actionable rights of access would be extinguished by the process. Any countervailing advantages to the public or those individuals, and also the planning benefits and degree of importance attaching to the development. In this case, members of the public intending to travel along Stony Lane to or from the west side of the crossing at point A, i.e. to or from locations to the west or northwest, will be presented with a long diversion, including via Rutland Road. The replacement route via the footbridge and including the footway along Rutland Road will be 255 metres via steps or 335 metres via ramps, i.e. a significant increase in overall length. For anyone intending, after crossing the railway, to continue in a southwesterly direction along Rutland Road in the general direction of Batley Town Centre, the increased overall length via footbridge and steps appears to be only slightly greater than at present, i.e. approximately 150 metres via steps, compared with existing 122 metres. The route via ramps would add an additional 80 metres to this distance. This is considered acceptable. Although the diversion route is significantly longer than the existing route via the crossing, at least if travelling via Stony Lane to or from point A, the replacement route has the advantage of not having to cross the railway line on the level. The existing route, while level, has gates. This may affect its accessibility to some users. There'll be no gates or barriers on the diversion route. Pedestrians using the crossing are currently required to wait until the signaller confirms it's safe to cross and gates are unlocked. In contrast, the diversion route would be available at all times. There'll be no delays to journeys caused by having to wait at the crossing. It's noted that waiting time at the crossing will likely increase in future, with proposed increase in line speed and more frequent services. There is currently some risk to users and the railway in general associated with use of the level crossing. The proposed diversion would allow Network Rail to physically close off the crossing and remove and reduce that risk. Prior to the making of the application, Network Rail carried out its own consultation process regarding closure of the crossing and provision of alternative routes. That consultation informed the position and design of the footbridge to be provided in the current proposal. That process and the options considered are described in the applicant's supporting statement, and the supplementary information provided by Network Rail included appendices D and E to the report. You will have already heard of the submission of a petition and various objections to the associated planning application. The Public Rights of Way team also carried out its own preliminary consultation, including with user groups, statutory undertakers, and with notices on site and on our website. A range of comments were received. These mirrored the concerns of local residents raised in response to the planning application. These were all negative. Comments received are found at Appendix F to the report. As these are well covered in the report and have been aired in relation to the planning application, I don't propose to go over those in detail here. I would note that the Peak and Northern Footpath Society, who are one of our statutory consultees regarding public path orders, did object to the proposed diversion, highlighting the significant overall increase in length and the need for steps and ramps. Peak and Northern are of the view that the greatly increased distance combined with the ramps and steps would create a much less convenient route for the public and reduce accessibility to many members of the public. Peak and Northern also noted that diversion would not itself be necessary for the construction of the footbridge. Following the consultation, officers have been in discussions and negotiations with the applicant regarding some of the concerns raised, particularly the issue of lighting and concerns about antisocial behaviour and crime. It's understood that the structure of a new railway footbridge would be the responsibility of Network Rail under the Transport Act 1968. However, the responsibility for maintenance of a new path created under a Section 257 diversion order would ordinarily be the responsibility of the council. That would include the surface of the path over the bridge, along with the steps and ramped path leading to the bridge from Howley Street. It's also clear that street lighting will need to be provided to address concerns regarding safety. There would be an increased liability on the council when compared with the existing short route over the crossing. The bridge construction will also be such that the surface for which the council would normally be responsible will be integrated with the bridge structure. In light of these factors, should members approve the making of the order, it is proposed that the council should first enter into a formal agreement with Network Rail regarding the responsibility for the bridge surface, which is proposed to be retained by Network Rail, and also provision of a commuted sum to offset the increased maintenance liability above and beyond the council's current liabilities. It's also proposed that street lighting should be provided. Negotiations are ongoing regarding the details of such an agreement, which will be made pursuant to Section 111 of the Local Government Act 1972, or alternatively Section 278 of the Highways Act 1980. Officers consider that any such formal agreement should be made before any order is made. Moving on to issues of procedure, the statutory procedure is a two-stage process which involves the making of a public path diversion order and its confirmation. If an order is made, it will be advertised and notice is served on various parties. There will be a period of at least 28 days for representations and objections. If an order is unopposed, the council may confirm it as an unopposed order. However, if any objections are duly made and not withdrawn, the council may forward the order to the Secretary of State at DEFRA, seeking its confirmation. Alternatively, the council may decide to abandon the order. If members decide to authorise the making of an order, but do not authorise officers to seek confirmation by the Secretary of State of an opposed order, a further decision would then be required on any objections that are received and potential referral of the order, if opposed, to the Secretary of State, or abandonment of an opposed order. If members refuse the application, the requested order will not be made. There is no appeal right for the applicant against a refusal. Members should form a view on making an order, also on whether to forward an order if opposed, and on what stance to take on an opposed order. When considering whether or not to make an order, members may take into account the proposal for entering into agreement with Network Rail regarding future responsibility for path surface on the bridge, provision of artificial lighting, and in respect of a commuted sum which would offset the council's increased liabilities regarding the steps and ramped path. Various options are described at paragraphs 2.24 to 2.28 in the report. The officer recommendation is at paragraph 6.1 in the report. This is to choose option 4 in the report, which is at option 4 at paragraph 2.27, and give authority to the Service Director, Legal Governance and Commissioning to make an order under section 257 to stop up Batley Footpath 20 at the Lady Anne level crossing and provide an alternative footpath via the footbridge as shown on the plan at Appendix A to the report. Also, to confirm the order if unopposed, but if opposed, to submit the order to the Secretary of State requesting confirmation without actively supporting the confirmation of the opposed order at a hearing of public inquiry. I would just add at this point, this is an appropriate approach where it's an order being made to allow planning of application to be planning development and in the approved planning application to go ahead. In addition, the recommendation is also to require that before making the order, the council enter into formal agreement with Network Rail regarding division of maintenance responsibility, the offsetting of future increased liabilities, and arrangements for lighting of the path, as described at paragraph 1.12 and 1.13 in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Can we have Tim Hill, please?
On this one, quite happy to. We're back to matters of opinion again. We're talking about 17 metres from A to B as it stands at the moment, compared to up to 335 metres by bridge and ramps. If you think that's a reasonable diversion, well, fine, that's your opinion. I don't think it is, and a lot of users won't think it is. The second point is, and again, it's a matter of opinion, will the provision of the ramps and the bridge be sufficiently attractive so that residents will use it? And if the answer to that is no, then you've effectively closed the right of way. And I think there's a lot of residents, neighbours that I've spoken to who simply won't use that bridge because they find it either unattractive for safety and crime reasons, or it's too steep, or they don't want the diversions or whatever. So it's down to those two issues again. And a lot of it's simply a matter of opinion. And, a lot of opinion for, a lot of opinion against. Yours prevails. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil Middlehurst.
Sorry? We don't see the relevance of carrying on with this situation. The only thing we do feel on this is we do have a right of appeal to the Secretary of State, which we're considering. But they say the police have done a report eventually, which stated that they're going to look at it in a year's time. Well, that's fine when the problems have occurred and the people have been hurt or whatever. They say they don't need CCTV. They've got CCTV on the box, signs up there, the cameras there. So I don't see that when you've got a manned situation, that with a CCTV, that you don't need it when it's unmanned. What we would, if you're going to go ahead with this, well, you've given the planning application, and I think you'll give to me, they go together anyway. The situation is, can the residents have a construction management plan or be involved in the construction management plan? Can the residents have a point of contact at Network Rail, not a line where you link somebody and information gets lost in translation? And can we have a point of contact with the council so that if Network Rail aren't doing what they say they're going to do and under the conditions you give them, at least somebody we can contact to tell them what's going on? That's all we can say. But I mean, whatever the merits of the situation, if we progress, let's progress in a sensible manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony Rivera.
Thank you, Chair. Members have now determined that the provision of a footbridge in this location is deemed to be acceptable on planning grounds. To progress the closure of the level crossing, for which the bridge is designed to provide a safe alternative means of crossing the railway, it's now necessary to divert the footpath over the new bridge. There seems to be an assumption in some quarters that the level crossing is being closed simply on the grounds of electrification. This is incorrect. May I remind the committee that the equipment in Batley signal box is over 40 years old and is in need of replacement, irrespective of electrification. The purpose of re-signalling is to introduce more reliable signalling, increase capacity and faster trains. This in turn necessitates the closure of the level crossing in any event on safety grounds. We've already said that to keep the crossing controlled by a gatebox would defer the necessary investment by at least 2 years, as well as seeing an additional £10 million of capital and a yearly £250,000 operational costs to the taxpayer. This would create an outlier of unnecessary local control when the vast majority of signalling in the West Yorkshire area is controlled from the York Route Control Centre. Such local control cannot be justified in a 21st century railway or to the taxpayer. Previous speakers have also cast some doubt as to whether electrification of the Transpennine will actually go ahead. I can only repeat what was said at the Huddersfield to West Town public inquiry last December. The DfT is committed to delivering the whole Transpennine upgrade, and as a show of commitment has awarded £589 million to progress the initial stages. We've done a huge amount of design work, and you can actually see progress in the field because there are masts being erected right now between Manchester and Stalybridge and York and Church Fenton. Advanced works have started between Huddersfield and Dewsbury, and we've recently secured list of building consent for the installation of catenary on Dewsbury and Cherwell viaducts, with Batley Viaduct to follow shortly. In a recent FOI request, a date of December 2027 was mentioned in relation to the commissioning, but that is for the whole line, not just the Dewsbury Leeds section, and that's the target we are working to. The last thing that we actually will happen is the switching on of the live overhead equipment, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done before then, such as vegetation clearance, modifying bridges, altering fencing and putting in the overhead masts themselves. The closure of the Leydown crossing is the first step in providing the full benefits of the upgrade. And as such, we ask that you follow the recommendation of your officers and approve the making of the section 257 for consultation purposes. Thank you.
Thank you. Members? Councillor Hall.
Thanks, Chair. Well, Andrew knows as well as I do, we sit on another planning committee, which about 2 or 3 months ago, we did a big application for the Huddersfield to West Town at Dewsbury electrification. As Tony's just said, you've got to do a lot of preparatory work before you can just get railway lines, electrification, blah, 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 in and down and working. We complain like hell round here and in the north that we don't get any money, and at last we've got some. This is part of a £1.2 billion scheme in the north of England to make lines safer, quicker, cleaner. This is the way that we need to be going. So I, for one, am in favour of this. We've already done the application itself just prior to this. To get things forward, we've got to get this diversion in. So I don't see any reason at all to spend too much time debating it.
So I will move it.
Councillor Pinnock.
Thank you, Chair. I will quite happily second that. But in doing so, I will answer one of the queries that one of the objectors made, and that is going back to the planning permission. There is a section there which says one of the conditions that local residents should be involved, and that ought to include, and that will include before it's discharged, in other words, agreed, the fact that there is a point of contact made available for that purpose. That does apply in a way to the footpath diversion. So I would like contact details for public right-of-way officer to be included in that, so that if there are any questions relating to the footpath diversion, as opposed to the planning application work, that you know who to contact. I think that's important. To me, it's always been important that we know who to contact directly about something that relates to something that affects you collectively, local residents. Most important. And one of the worst things about large organisations is that they don't make it easy for people to contact folk. So going back to the planning permission, that condition should give that information, and it will be reviewed by planning officers. But as I say, I think it should include contact details for public right-of-way officer as well, so that you know who to talk to in relation to both of the things that are going on. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back on your comments there, Councillor Pinnock, we'd be more than happy, and the contact details would be available on the public right-of-way order, and also the contact details for the officers within the discharge of condition for the construction management plan will be available.
Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in agreement with speakers who've already outlined their thoughts. As I understand it, and through you, Chair, I'll look for a nod from officers. There are a number of options in this decision, and I think that the one that seems most appropriate at the moment is that if it is opposed, that we refer it to the Secretary of State. Is that the one of the options that seemed like to me the best option to follow as an appropriate one to add on to our decision already made this afternoon? Thank you.
Yes, if I can just sort of step in there, the process from here, if approval is to make an order, one of the options there was to also make a decision on referring it to the Secretary of State at this juncture, rather than coming back to members for a further decision on that. And the recommendation in option 4 is to recommend that the order is confirmed by the Secretary of State if it's opposed, with us taking a sort of more passive role and Network Rail taking a lead on promoting the case.
Okay, thank you. Any other members? Yeah, can we go to the vote, please?
Okay, so the vote's to approve the recommendation that's set out paragraph 6. Councillor Hall. Councillor Ramsey. 4. Councillor Pervez. 4. Councillor Sheard.
4.
Councillor Stephen.
4.
Councillor Gregg.
4.
Councillor Pinnock.
4.
Councillor Lawson.
4.
Councillor Sane.
4.
Yeah, that's unanimous.
That's
Thanks.
carried. Can we move on to the next application, 2021-93665?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. My name is Alice Downham and I'm the case officer for this application. The application relates to 3 Shirley Villas, Cartwright Street in Rawfolds, Cleckheaton, and is for the erection of front and rear dormers and roof alterations. Members will remember this application from the previous subcommittee meeting on the 17th of March, when it was deferred for a site visit. This slide shows the plans as brought to the previous committee, with 2 small pitched roof dormers to the front, a large flat roof dormer to the rear, and a hip to gable conversion. At the previous committee, it was recommended for refusal by officers. Since the previous committee, officers have entered discussions with the applicant and amended plans have been submitted, as shown on the screen here. The principal changes are the replacement of the large flat roof dormer with 2 smaller pitched roof dormers and the retention of the rear chimney breast. The report before members details officers' full assessment of the proposal. However, to summarise, the proposed dormers are now considered a more sympathetic design and are finished in slates and lead cladding, which is considered in keeping with the age and style of the host dwelling. The bulk and massing has been significantly reduced. It is noted that the dormers have been designed to comply with the guidance for dormers in the Council's House Extensions and Alterations Supplementary Planning document. Moreover, the dwelling is not a designated heritage asset, it is not located in a conservation area and is not a listed building. In terms of the hip to gable conversion, this element would not be highly visible and the existing chimney would be maintained. As such, officers, including the conservation and design team, consider that the proposal would no longer cause significant harm to the historic environment or visual amenity. In conclusion, the application is now recommended for approval on balance. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have the applicant, please? Andrew?
Here again today. So last time when I was here, my demeanour was very different, and hopefully from the site visit this morning, you can understand my frustration from being told that all the pictures of the house were all nice, green, countryside, and then when you get there, you realise actually it's not. So hopefully you can my demeanour's explained. So I was frustrated because I was more than willing to compromise from day one, and I didn't actually think that I needed to be here. However, here we are. But I really did want the large dormers and all the headroom just to give the house the space I felt it required. However, after going backwards and forwards and more communication with Alice, we've decided, to go on the smaller dormers, front and rear. And I agree, actually, in hindsight, it does give the house a better look, and in keeping with it, it is a much and a marked improvement to the house. So I'm glad this process has gone down the way it has. But ultimately, I think, this house deserves this sort of renovation, and this is, the spec that I want to give it. So I do appreciate you, taking the time to go and view my house. Thank you.
Thank you. Members? Councillor Stephen?
Thanks, Chair. I am really glad that we went to see this property because I think it just does make it really clear about the house itself and the row of houses and the location where it sits. We talk quite often about applicants and officers working really well together, and I loved it when I read that the agent had submitted further amended plans unsolicited, because I think that's great that following the planning meeting that they've actually tried to listen to what the issues were. I think keeping the chimney stack is brilliant and it looks such a better option. I think, to me, I don't see a reason why this shouldn't be approved now. I completely agree with the officer's recommendation and I'd be happy to propose that we accept that.
So are you moving that, yeah?
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Completely agree. It's always good to see these things come to an acceptable conclusion for all parties. There's been a proper dialogue, I feel, and that's been very constructive, and it does enhance the house visually, I feel. So yes, happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hall.
It's just good to see that after a bit of debate, bit of negotiation that a satisfactory outcome has been achieved. It has been moved, it's been seconded. If it hadn't been, I'd have done one or other. One thing I do want to know is, who is the rugby league player that's in that coloured glass? Because I think it's bloody fantastic, and I think something should be done to get it in paper that explain who it is. I can only think of John Bentley. That it? All right. Well, worth coming out to planning then. I've learnt something new.
Councillor Pinnock.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I thought it was a very useful site visit this morning, and it's a area I've known quite well as a ward member, and they are lovely houses. They really are, and I just want to make certain that they are classed as a heritage asset. Because regardless of what's going on round the site, which it is not entirely ideal, the houses are, have their own quality. If you can shut out things that are around it, they do have a lot of appeal. If only we can do something about the Grove. I don't know what that might entail, but I just want assurance that we can have this as a designated heritage asset, because I think it is a heritage asset, and will be enhanced by the dormers, and actually in the same way by this stained glass window. I know it's not your house, but it still adds to the appeal of the site.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on your point about it's not a designated heritage asset, but it's what we call as a non-designated heritage asset. Now that is a process, it's a year-long process that the council is going through to have these. They wouldn't be grade listed, if that makes sense, but they would be a non-heritage asset, and therefore consideration would have to be, there would be level of protection there. So in answer to your question, we would be looking to have that as a non-designated heritage asset.
Thank you for that. Nobody else? No. Can we go to the vote, please?
Okay, so the vote is to delegate to officers to approve the application. Councillor Hall? Councillor Ramsey? 4. Councillor Pervez? 4. Councillor Sheard?
4.
Councillor Stephen?
4.
Councillor Gregg?
4.
Councillor Pinnock?
4.
Councillor Lawson?
4.
Councillor Seen?
4.
Okay, so that's unanimous approved.
That's approved. Thank you. So the next application is 2021-92771, Firth Yard.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Liz Chippendale and I'm the case officer for this application. The application is sought for the erection of 2 industrial units to be used for Class E, which is light industry, and Class B, storage and distribution. The application was deferred by members at the last committee meeting to allow for members to visit the site, which was undertaken this morning. The application site comprises an industrial yard, which has a large mill building along the northern boundary, a block of buildings to the southeast, which are currently used as a workshop and residential. The site is accessed via Mill Road to the east. The character surrounding the site is varied in terms of use and built form. To the rear is a scrapyard and associated buildings. There is a residential units adjacent to the site on Mill Road and further to the north. To the immediate north is a children's play area with Batley Car Mills, a Grade 2 listed building to the northeast. The application site is partly allocated as waste safeguarded land within the Kirklees local plan. The proposal is for the erection of 2 industrial units for use of storage and distribution and light industry. Unit 1 would be located to the west of the site, adjacent to number 23 Mill Road and opposite the existing mill building. The proposed height of the unit is 6 metres with a shallow pitched roof. Unit 2 would be located to the east of the site at a proposed height of 6.5 metres. The proposal would be served by the existing access from Mill Road, which would be resurfaced to create a shared surface area, so shared surface access. Following the decision to defer the application, an amended plan was submitted which has removed car parking spaces 1 and 2, which were located adjacent to the access to the scrapyard, which were here previously. A total of 9 parking spaces are now proposed within the site. As set out within the Principle of Development section of the assessment, the principle of the erection of the industrial units partly on land which is allocated as waste safeguarded land is considered on balance to not prevent, hinder or unreasonably restrict the operation of the waste development as set out within policy LP45 of the Kirklees local plan. The proposed scale and design of the industrial units is considered by officers to be acceptable due to the existing industrial settings of the site and within the context of the existing and larger mill building. The proposal is therefore considered by officers to comply with LP24 of the local plan. I will now pass you over to Ryan Kinder, Highways Officer, to discuss the highways matters.
Through you, Chair. Ryan Kinder, Highway Development Management. To summarise the highway section of the report, the access to the site is of an existing established nature, which is to be resurfaced to improve its current condition. 9 parking spaces are to be provided within the site. The request for swept pass for a fire tender has been demonstrated. Although it is relatively narrow, this can be achieved and is the size of one of the units reduced to accommodate this accordingly. The parking provision for the existing dwellings is to be maintained as contained in the plans associated with the planning approval reference 2019-90398, which is a separate application to this one today. On-site observations have indicated the scrapyard and turning vehicles around within their own yard, and this enables entering and exiting the site in forward gear, so not consider an issue in this respect. With regards to the vintage fire engine garage, this is in the vicinity of bays 10 and 11. As witnessed on the site visit this morning, the existing vintage fire truck can manoeuvre in and out of the site with its current layout. The introduction of parking bays opposite the unit that facilitate this vehicle will not have any effect in terms of manoeuvrability, as the proposed parking spaces will be in place of the existing shrubs and brambles, which will be removed to facilitate them and will not take up any additional space. The parking bays will be narrower than the existing shrubs, making the access track wider. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can we have Mrs. Whitehead, please?
Members of the committee, summary of our objection to the first planning application, Unit 2. The length of proposed plan will restrict access to our site. Any vehicle parked on the front elevation making deliveries and dispatches to the doorway will block the entrance to first yard and make access impossible. Due to the increase in traffic since the mill began charging for parking within their complex, both sides of Mill Road are full of parked cars, often overhanging the marked white line. The only option for our vehicle is to reverse out of the gates, swing to the left into the area where Unit 2 is proposed, then drive out safely onto Mill Road. We were pleased when this application was withdrawn. However, another plan was submitted, including the same footage of Unit 2, but with an additional 4 parking spaces and an industrial bin. This adds more restrictions of movements of our vehicle, with the possibility of damage to the vehicle, gateway and fencing, and will always require a guide to be at the back when the vehicle's in motion. The facts are that the vehicle is 65 years old and it doesn't have power steering or any electrical aids. There's no cameras or anything. The area within our fence is well maintained, and we've been on this site for 37 years. It was purchased from Kirklees Council, who clearly stated by them that our rights of access, vehicle and pedestrian, would be included in any future change of owners. We have documents of proof from Kirklees Council, Land Registry, and it's on our deeds. Presently, when moving in and out of the garage, the engine can be parked in first yard, allowing other vehicles to pass, whilst the garage door and gate are attended to. This is approximately a 5-minute operation, and no traffic will be able to pass. Please consider your vote before you commit this vehicle to a garage without access. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have the agent, please? Alison?
Good afternoon. Concerns were raised at the last meeting regarding 2 key issues: access to other units and ensuring that there was sufficient space for the old fire engine to access and egress from the garage. With the support of Highways officers, the 2 parking spaces in front of the old mill building have been removed following comments from adjacent businesses regarding access and egress for commercial vehicles. This has been done on a without prejudice basis because in actual fact all legal rights of way have been maintained on the plans previously. Clarification has also been added to the plan with regards to the old fire engine access. The width of the garage has been shown at 3.9 metres and the width of the available access is actually 4.7 metres. As such, there's ample space for the old fire engine to be moved in and out of the garage at any time. Other relevant issues addressed through this application include: 1, the nature of proposals as business uses would be compatible with the business operations of the nearby waste management facilities and would not prevent, hinder or reasonably restrict their operation. The proposals therefore comply with local plan policy LP 45. The scale of the units has been reduced in terms of height, massing and position with regard to visual and residential amenity concerns, and officers are satisfied the proposals would not result in any overshadowing or overbearing. A professional noise impact assessment accompanies the application, and environmental health officers accept the proposals will not impact on residential amenities. The proposed operating hours are not unsociable hours: 8:30 to 5:30 Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 4:30 Saturdays, and no opening on Sundays. A full service vehicle turning head for bin wagons and emergency service vehicles has been provided where currently there is none, so this will benefit other businesses operating from this access, as will the surfacing with tarmac, given that the access road is currently unsurfaced. As we've said previously, land ownership boundaries have been rigorously checked, as has the width required for the right of access enjoyed by others, and the proposals do not affect any third-party property or access rights. Although this is not a material planning matter, the applicant wanted to clarify this following comments by other third parties. Finally, the proposals will create new employment for the local area. We therefore respectfully ask that the committee to endorse the officer's recommendation and approve this planning application. Thank you.
Thank you. Members? Greg?
Thank you, Chair. And it was really good to go and have a look at this site this morning, and appreciate the officers from the council. And obviously it was good to see the fire engine navigating its way out of what clearly is going to make life more difficult. I acknowledge that. I do acknowledge that it's going to happen. I'm actually got a question for the officers. On the left-hand side of the entrance, there is some sort of shrubland that is sort of making life even more difficult at the moment to turn the vehicle out of the building that it's in. What is going to happen to that? Is that going to be made clearer, and will it make life easier for that vehicle to get out of the building that it's currently in. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We're just going to pull up the site plan currently. As you'll see on the plan here, so you've got Unit 2 to your left-hand side, and then you've got parking area 6 and 7, and that isn't currently where the greenery area is and the tree shrubbery area that we saw this morning. So that will be cleared. I think it's approximately about 3 metres, although we will clarify that. However, that will be cleared. It will be car parking spaces. However, to answer your question, the greenery and shrubbery will be cleared.
I think you meant on the opposite.
Sorry, Chair.
Did you mention on the opposite side?
So it was. Thank you, Chair. It was, as you're going in, there's the building with the fire engine on the left, and on that left-hand side, where the vehicle is trying to sort of it turns to the left to get out. Is that car parking space outside of the immediate left-hand side of their building? Will it be car parking spaces there, or is that going to be? I'm just a little bit unsure.
It's car parking space 8 and 9, and then as you go further towards the access, that will be cleared for the necessary access onto the site.
Right. Okay. So yeah. Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's
Is
fine.
That fine matters?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Anybody else? Councillor Pinnock.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a question about surfacing. I noticed that condition 4 talks about surfacing and drainage of access road and parking areas. Does that mean everywhere? Because one of the things we all noticed this morning was the unevenness of the surface, and it must make driving a vehicle like the fire engine over a surface like that rather difficult. But if it's all going to be resurfaced with a nice shiny new level surface, then that, I guess, will make driving that vehicle a good deal easier. I know the manoeuvring might be a slightly different matter, but you haven't got to worry about the surface. Is that true?
Thank you, Chair. So condition 4, you're quite right. It states about the surfacing and drainage of the access road and parking areas. So we could have that as a pre-commencement condition for that information to be addressed through any discharge of condition. Obviously, any resurfacing would have to be commensurate with the application. However, it would be within that access area. Does that clarify?
Yes, because as I say, that would make manoeuvring such a vehicle a lot easier if that can be done, particularly if it's made a pre-commencement condition. That's got to happen, because actually resurfacing the yard will improve things for everybody, and not just the fire engine. It seems to me. So
we saw that on site, didn't we, about the condition of the road? So it would be an improvement that would possibly come along with this application.
Thank you for that. Any other members want to speak? All right, can we go to the vote, please? Oh, who's going to move this? Yeah, go on. Oh, Stephen.
Sorry, can I just ask a question? It's kind of still relating to spaces 8 and 9 outside of the garage where the fire engine is. It says in the update, officers consider that the proposed 9 parking spaces retains a sufficient level of parking. What would the level be that would be not considered sufficient? Is that if, for example, those 2 were to not be included, would that drop that below a sufficient level of parking? Because I'm just trying to get my head around seeing the shrubbery as you're going into the site on the left-hand side that Councillor Gregg was just talking about. To me, I might be wrong, that seems narrower than the car spaces, which obviously is, although the 6 and 7 on the right-hand side might be the same width now of the shrubs that are there, so it's the same obstruction for the turning of the fire engine. 8 and 9 to me feel like that would take up more space with a car park there rather than it being the shrubs. So if those two were to be considered an issue, would dropping it to 7 make it insufficient parking for the whole area?
Through you, Chair. Originally, there was 11 spaces proposed and we've actually dropped 2 already. So I think there's got to be a cut-off point. So any more loss probably would not be acceptable from Highways perspective. Thank you.
So Councillor Pinnock, you're moving it. All right.
If you wish, I'll move it.
Thank you. And Councillor Ramsey is going to second it.
Yeah,
So can we go to the vote, please?
The vote is to delegate to officers to approve the application. Councillor Hall. Councillor Ramsey. 4. Councillor Pervez. 4. Councillor Shear.
4.
Councillor Stephen.
4.
Councillor Gregg.
4.
Councillor Pinnock.
4.
Councillor Lawson.
4.
And Councillor Hussain.
4.
Okay, so that's approved.
Thank you. Next application 2021-93286.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. My name is Ellie Worth and I am the case officer for this application. The application is a reserved matters for the erection of 41 dwellings pursuant to the outline permission granted in June 2021. Before the application is discussed in details, one final comment was received from Councillor Bamford after the committee update yesterday. The concerns raised were including the height and maintenance of the ball striking net and its impact on visual amenity, the existing claim prow issue on the site, and access to the hedge by the Millennium Green for maintenance. These concerns have already been addressed within the committee report before members. Here is a location plan, and as members will know, the site is allocated for housing in the Kirklees local plan, which was established as part of the outline permission last year. Here you can see the indicative site plan for the outline application, whereby the matter of access was agreed. This is taken from the west of the site,
onto Wentworth Drive. The number of dwellings have also been reduced from the indicative number of 44 put before members at the last committee to 41. Here is an aerial photo of the site. It is currently an open field with public footpaths in which run through it and adjacent to it. So this is a public footpath, and along here, and then this dotted line to the north is the claimed public footpath. To the north of the site is Emily Cricket Club, and to the south is Millennium Green. To the east and west are existing residential properties. Here are some photos of the site. This photo is taken where access has already been approved from Wentworth Drive, so the shrubs will be removed along here. This bottom photo is taken from the existing access from Green Acres, which is used to access the Millennium Green. This gravelled area will be retained and was conditioned for that as part of the outline permission. This top photo is a view towards the cricket club. Along here will be the ball striking net, which will be discussed in more detail shortly. This bottom photo is a view towards the east, back onto Green Acres Close. This photo is a view to the south towards the Millennium Green. As you can see, there's screening between the site and the Millennium Green. Lastly, this bottom photo shows where the access will be within the site, so it will be along here. This is the proposed site plan. It shows a total of 41 dwellings, of which 32 would be detached, 10 would be semi-detached with 3 terraces and 6 residential flats. The proposal includes one central road, like the indicative outline approved, with private roads and shared accesses adjoining it. The existing prows will be retained. These are annotated in blue on the plan on screen. An application for a claimed footpath to the north of the site, which would run along here, is being considered by our public footpath team. However, it hasn't been shown on the plans, as officers note that there are significant paths throughout the site which will connect to the 2 existing prows. Here are some examples of the house types proposed. I've chosen 3 out of the 6 to give members an idea. This house type is the Kenford. It's a detached 4-bed dwelling. This example shows a double garage, however there are others on site with just a single garage. This house type is the Kirkbridge. It is a 3-bed semi-detached dwelling. Lastly, this is an example of the residential flats. These will be ground and first floor, 1-bed units, which will both have dual outlook. Here is a street scene elevation. The dwellings would all be 2-storey and would be appropriate to the local context. Details of the proposed 17-metre high ball strike net are also shown on this plan. I have also added a picture in the bottom corner to give members an idea of what the ball strike net would look like in context, as this is an example elsewhere within the district. The application is also supported by Sport England on this point. In terms of visual amenity, officers are happy with the design, size and scale of the dwellings proposed. The units would also be finished in reconstituted stone with grey tiles to the roof. Such materials are desirable and would ensure that the site is in keeping with the surrounding built form, in which is constructed from both stone and brick. In terms of residential amenity, appropriate separation distances have been achieved within the site and to existing properties, other than plot 8, which does have a shortfall. This has been identified within paragraphs 10.28 to 10.29 of the committee report. All new dwellings would have an acceptable internal floor space in accordance with the National Described Space Standards. Appropriately sized gardens are also proposed with a shared communal space for the occupants of the flats. In terms of highway safety, officers are also in support of the scheme, as appropriate parking, visitor parking and waste collection have been demonstrated. However, I will now pass you over to my highways colleague Ryan Kinder, who will discuss these matters in more detail.
Through you, Chair. To summarise the highway section of the report, the principle of development in terms of access to and from the site and associated traffic generation has already been approved at outline stage and considered acceptable from a highways perspective. This includes the existing traffic movements to and from Wentworth Drive. With regards to the internal arrangements, discussions have taken place regarding the internal layout with a number of revisions proposed. These include amendments for forward visibility and visitor parking. A total of 8 internal spaces for visitors is proposed, whilst ideally 10 would be suggested in line with the SPD Highway Design Guide. Looking at it pragmatically to accommodate the public right-of-way and landscaping, Highways consider this acceptable on this instance. It should also be noted that each dwelling does provide the level of suggested off-street parking for this type of development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of landscaping, the scheme proposed is a significant improvement to what has been shown indicatively outlined. Small areas of open space are provided throughout the site, especially along the prow, along with a number of street trees. Lastly, in terms of contributions, a section 106 was secured at outline, and therefore the scheme, if approved by members, will deliver 8 affordable units. These have been starred on the plan on screen. An education contribution of £78,891, an off-site public open space contribution of 44,006p, which is likely to be used at the recreation park on Warburton, a highways contribution of £20,520.50p towards a sustainable travel plan, and a £7,000 contribution towards a traffic regulation order in respect of Wentworth Drive and Beaumont Street Junction if required. A drainage management and maintenance plan will also be secured under the section 106, along with an off-site biodiversity contribution of £77,970 in order to have a net gain of 10%. 226 representations have been received, 4 of which have been captured in the committee update. All objections have been carefully considered within the detailed comments by officers. This can be found within paragraph 10.78 of the committee report. As such, officers are recommending approval subject to the contributions being provided within the section 106. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can we have the first speaker, please? Frank.
Chair and members, my name is Frank Spivey. I have lived in the village of Emley all my life. I represent the residents of Emley. An application was made last year to the PROW team by Emley residents for the existing footpath, which has been in continuous use by village residents of all ages for over 50 years, along the boundary of the cricket field on the north side of the site, to be recorded as a public right-of-way. The footpath is used daily by hundreds of children, village residents. It's a safety feature that allows everyone to walk to the playing field, community centre, youth club, Mooga, and Warburton without the need to walk down Upper Lane with only one poorly maintained footpath, and Warburton that has no footpaths and brings children into direct conflict with traffic. The PROW team consultation response date at 13th of April states, it should be noted that an application has been made for a demo order to record an additional footpath, file reference 311. The route claimed appears to pass through the gardens of plots 14 to 20 and in the vicinity of the proposed 17-metre high ball strike net. PROW notes the new layout plan shows no path to be proposed at this location. PROW also advises generally that any grant of planning permission, if that happened, would not in itself divert or extinguish any public rights of way that may subsist but which are not currently recorded. To address possible future issues that may arise due to the demo application, the applicant may wish to consider applying to stop up and divert the claimed footpath onto an alternative route. The site layout plan should be amended to meet this requirement. Members need to be aware that to approve the scheme as it is, currently is likely to create potential problems for them in the future, as the current plans do not take into consideration the current application for the adoption of the said footpath. In addition, the officer report to committee contradicts the advice given to PROW. Officer comment, given that the application made for the claimed footpath to the north of the site has not been determined, file reference 311, officers do not consider it necessary to be shown on the proposed plans, as this will be assessed under a separate public footpath application. The case officer has not fully
30
considered
seconds.
the case officer has not fully considered the said footpath before making a decision on the application, and further, if permission were to be granted, there is no consideration for how the footpath will be kept open and unobstructed until any suitable and safe diversion is applied for by the applicant and agreed by Kirklees. How a development affects the public right-of-way is material consideration when determining planning applications, and officers and members should ensure that all potential consequences are taken into account. The outline planning application did not provide sufficient information. We will therefore ask for a deferral until PROW determines the application.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Wood, please.
Thank you, Chairman, councillors. My name is Mike Wood. I'm a long-standing resident in Emley, parish councillor, and also a trustee of Emley Moor Miners Recreation Ground and Institute. And it is in that latter capacity which I address you today. The welfare ground has been home to both village football and cricket for generations. And as you all know, the cricket pitch adjoins this development. As per the email our trust chairman sent you all individually earlier this week, we would ask the community to be mindful of the ball strike netting issues. The siting, height, specification, access both to our boundary wall and the netting for repair and maintenance, and finally the long-term legal and financial responsibility needs to be agreed in order that the Emley can continue to securely enjoy village cricket for generations to come. The application that's been lodged illustrates a 17-metre high net with three support stanchions as per the drawing that was up on the screen. However, we appear to have some discussion here about the number of stanchions that are required, as we've been told that there should be stanchions every 15 metres along the length. And bearing in mind, this is a 60-foot high fence. And also, there are mentions of 17-metre fences high netting and 18-metre high netting. So which is it? We get winds up to 80 miles an hour in Emley, and we're at 670 feet above sea level. We don't think lightweight construction, which we've been advised, but we've had no actually proper dialogue about, is appropriate. And surely shouldn't this be included in the design and access statement and construction management plan? We realise that the houses are needed. We haven't an objection about that, but surely there should be more open dialogue with us as the neighbour. And a very significant point to our situation is this netting. And we are not satisfied that it has been addressed properly at this moment in time, and I'd ask for a deferment. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have James Martin, please?
Hi, I'm not here to object to this new development, but to point out areas which Kirklees conveniently don't tell you. There are 4 car parking spaces to the entrance to the development in a very secluded area. The police report, which was part of the consultation, strongly advises planning and the developer and states provision should be in curtilage or within view of the car owner's home, and rear parking court areas hidden from view and behind fencing are unacceptable. They are known to become associated with antisocial behaviour, as well as increasing the opportunity for car crime and rear access. It shall be the duty of each authority to which this section applies to exercise its various functions with due regard. Right, they have to reasonably prevent crime and disorder in its area, including antisocial and other behaviour, adversely affecting the local environment, and the misuse of drugs, alcohol and other substances in its area. Therefore, it is advised that the points raised in this document should be implemented. That's the police guy you had earlier. Right, it should be implemented, and any resubmitted plans for the applicant to be assessed by the design and out crime officer prior to the final planning decision. Is this too much to ask for? We don't believe it is. I can't believe you do. Would you want drug dealers near your house and children? Syringes on the ground, cars arriving at all times of night and day, radios blaring, shouting, swearing, confrontation? No, you wouldn't, and neither do we. It is unjust to do this to the existing incoming residents. I implore you as our trusted local councillors to reject this proposal and listen to the police and Emly community and place these spaces in the actual development within view of the houses, not in the secluded spot planned. Also, the planning officer in her report states the land area is 1.2 hectares. However, she has included the large area between the Millennium Green and Greenacres Close, which you've seen, which should not be included.
30 seconds.
As it is an area legally set aside for the trustees to access with machinery for maintenance. This reduces the land area available to under 1 hectare, and therefore the proposed 41 houses is higher than the LP7 recommended density of 35. I would therefore ask that the correct density of 35 is applied and the 41 houses proposed is rejected. Now you guys do your duty.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark Jones, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Jones. I'm Head of Planning at Barratt Homes. Our involvement at the site started after the outline planning permission was granted, but we are aware of the site's history and have therefore made every effort to try and resolve concerns raised by local residents. A large number of the concerns raised relate to matters of principle, which were resolved by the outline planning approval. There will now be 41 new homes, which is less than the indicative number of 44 identified in your local plan. The existing public rights of way are retained in situ, and green space will be provided along these routes. These two established routes will be connected via the proposed footways within the scheme. The scheme was amended to increase the amount of green space and landscaping, as the officers already mentioned to you earlier, and the areas of public open space have been designed in collaboration with the council's landscape officer. We have no choice but to meet Sport England's requirement for the ball strike net. They would object to anything lower, though at the proposed height, there can be absolutely no concern in respect of the safety of the proposed homes and the ongoing operation of the cricket club. Detailed highway designs have been agreed at the Wentworth Drive access point. The detailed design ensures that no existing residents will be impacted at all. For the avoidance of any doubt, there is no ransom issue here either. The Millennium Greens access from Greenacres Close is retained. There will also be no vehicular access to the development from Greenacres Close. It will be pedestrian and cycle only. The scheme was amended to increase the standoff from the proposed homes to the trees located within Millennium Green. Access rights will also be provided so that these trees can be maintained in future. Importantly, the council's landscape, ecology and tree officers are all in support of the scheme. The development will deliver 20% affordable homes on site. The proposed drainage strategy for the site has been agreed with the council's drainage officers and Yorkshire Water. Financial contributions will be paid towards improving Warburton recreational ground, local schools, sustainable transport measures, and to deliver biodiversity gain. The scheme before you today is an excellent example of where developers have worked proactively to make tangible changes to resolve concerns raised by local residents, which your officers can confirm, and I think that was alluded to earlier in the presentation by the officer. I'm aware that the outline application came to planning committee 3 times before being approved. This reserve matters was submitted last August. This is the 4th time that the site has been before members, and collectively the conditions on the outline permission and the proposed ones for the reserve matters amount to 45 conditions which will need to be adhered to. Just quickly on the comments just made, there's no natural surveillance at present. This scheme will generate a high level of natural surveillance which currently doesn't exist. I therefore hope that members are able to support the officer's recommendation for approval today. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil?
That's the next one.
Or is that next one? Okay. All right, members. Councillor Ramsey.
Can I just ask a couple of questions, if that's all right? If we were to look to defer until we've got a determination for the public right of way for that informal path, how long might that be? What's that timeline? And also, is there have we done any work around crime prevention around those car parking places? So just those two at the moment.
Thank you, Chair. My colleague Phil will respond in terms of the PROW question. However, deferring on the result of something else is something that the committee will have to think seriously about in terms of the timeframes. In terms of the crime prevention matters and security matters, I'd refer to condition 14 on the reserve matters that looks for additional, which looks for the submission of additional crime prevention security measures. So this could be secured through a condition, an appropriately worded condition that would monitor such matters. But I'll refer to my colleague Phil in terms of the PROW application. Thank you, Chair.
Hi, yes, the definitive modification order application was received last year. We do have a large backlog of these applications, and it's not one that we're currently investigating. There is a process whereby applicants can apply for a direction from the Secretary of State for us to prioritise those applications, but that's not happened yet. So with that in mind, it would be potentially some considerable time before we're in a position to determine it. So I don't think deferral of the application for that will be appropriate.
Do you mind if I come back then and just ask? The gentleman who was from Barrett said that the public right-of-ways that are in existence at the moment will be connected by the footpath. Can you just show us on the screen how that works and what diversion that is?
Yes, there's an existing public footpath, which I think is Denbydale 21, I believe, which cuts diagonally across the site, which is the blue line there. Since we first saw the designs for this site, the developers have actually modified that to ensure that route remains on its existing line. So there's no diversion required for that. There is another public footpath running immediately abutting the boundary of the site. I believe it's actually outside the boundary just, which will also not be directly affected. The claimed public footpath would run through where we got the gardens of numbers 14 through 20. That hasn't specifically been acknowledged in the design, but they have held open the possibility that if there is a diversion needed, there's a route that could be on the south side of those houses and then cutting across at the attenuation tank at the corner. Obviously, if planning permission is granted, that wouldn't override highway law. And if this is found to be a public right of way, that they would still need to take into account that.
Sorry, I probably didn't make myself clear. I thought that the gentleman from Barrett's was indicating that there was going to be a footway through here that connected the two public rights of way. And I was assuming it was either at Green Acres Close, which you can see there where there's a pedestrian and cycle area, or it was higher up near the units, can't describe it, yes, about there, where your arrow was just before. So it's either there or higher up. Those were my assumptions. Are they wrong?
I'm not sure what the intended status of those routes is. It's perhaps a highways question. But they have the designs do show some physical connections in various directions from the existing public footpath.
Okay. Any other members? Councillor Craig.
Thank you, Chair. It's clear there's quite a lot of people in Emley not very happy about this development, and it's interesting to see what's been said. And just a couple of questions I've got is related to the policies the council have to adhere to on spaces for car parking. it's been alluded that there's not enough car parking in terms of for visitors as well as potentially residents. I think there's been a bit of an acknowledgement from the council that that might be true, but where do we stand on that? Because how far short are we on where we should be at for something like this in terms of spaces? Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Through you, Chair. As indicated in my presentation, the guidance, it's not strictly has to be adhered to, but it's guidance. There should be 1 per 4, so that indicates a shortfall of 2 spaces on the street. With regards to off-street parking for residents, the allocated provision is met, so there's no shortfall for off-street parking per dwelling. Is that okay?
Councillor Ramsey.
Yeah, I'm really sorry about this. Just with regards to the size of the garages, is the size of the garages sufficient to be able to park a decent sized car in?
Just to clarify, to accommodate a car, garages should be 3 metres wide by 6 metres long, and all the garages do meet that size.
Thank you, Chair. There are a number of things that I'm not really happy about this, and some of them have been highlighted by those raising objections. I look at the committee report, and there are 2 sets of conditions, one deriving from the outline permission and one for this reserved matters application. And it's not clear to me how they relate to each other. There are a number of references in the outline conditions which say there should be reserved matters conditions relating to this. But I have looked at the 2 lists, and there are a number of things that don't cross over. I do think it would be easier from the point of view of those deciding the application, namely us, if we could have all these conditions in one list, so that we could see which derive from the outline permission and which then require reserved matters conditions. And there are a number of cases which talks about pre-commencement conditions, and we've already talked about that in other applications today. I do think these are important because it enables everybody to have confidence that the thing is being done according to the rules. And I would also argue, and I'm not quite sure where it is, unless it's condition 10 from the outline permission, which requires a construction environmental management plan. Does this include cooperation and consultation with the local residents? Because as we have said on several occasions today, I have said anyway, how important it is that the local residents have confidence that a development that is taking place in their midst is actually being done according to the rules. And that from a number of poor experiences that I've had, is absolutely important. I would support deferring this, to be honest, because quite apart from the issues that the objectors have mentioned, it's not clear to me, and I'm looking at this from perhaps a certain administrative point of view, how these conditions are actually going to be used to make this work. And I repeat, that is a very important consideration in ensuring that developments take place in accordance with the rules, and these are the rules. So could I move deferral? Just put that on the table, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just come in on a couple of points just in terms of the process and an outline and a reserve matter. So your outline sets the outline permission for the application, and then as part of that, you can attach conditions to that. So although there's the conditions on the outline, they'll be worded as the reserve matters should include information on X, Y, and Z, not that the reserve matters should include conditions. So you would have conditions on your outline that the reserve matters application should include information such as flooding, remediation, etc., etc. So just because they haven't followed forward doesn't mean that they are not relevant. So what's happened is the reserve matters application has been submitted, including all that information, and then has been approved as part of this application. So it's the wording of the conditions on the outline application that the reserve matters has to include, not that that application should include those conditions, that those conditions follow forward.
Councillor Pinnock.
Does that clarify? Or, right.
Not big, but I mean, we've had this problem before. We've just got a summary of the condition.
Yep.
In the old days, and I've been on planning committee a long time, we used to have all the conditions written out in full, so that you could see immediately what was being proposed as part of that condition. I know it takes up more paper, but it does give you the knowledge of what you're actually dealing with, because it's not written out in here. It's not clear to me where there is a relationship between the two sets of conditions, how it actually works itself out. It's not clear to me at all, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Just to pick up on that, so that the conditions will all be part of the previous application, which would be available on the website, and we'll have all the outline of conditions, and the reference number was provided within the committee report for members to review. And as I said, any conditions that are attached to the outline would then follow forward onto reserve matters of details that were submitted through the consideration of the application.
Thank you. So, Councillor Pinnock, are you still?
I still don't think that because there are some loose ends which the objectors have identified, as well as what I've just been talking about. Now, all right, I probably should have looked at all those conditions before I came here today, but I'm afraid in the middle of an election campaign that's quite difficult. And I'm not using that as an absolute excuse, but it is relatively complicated, and I accept that some things will carry over, but it's not clear to me how that actually happens. I'd welcome views from other members.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Julia Stedman, the Group Leader in Development Management. I think just to, I suppose, simplify in terms of the process, the procedure with outline and reserve matters. So as we know, with an outline application, that's sort of establishing the principle plus then any other matters which are being asked to be considered at that stage. So in this case, we had the outline application, which established the principle of the 44 dwellings on site, along with the point of access into the site. So that was approved. Conditions were then attached and are summarised on page 177 of the report, which is what Councillor Pinnock's been referring to. So these conditions, they are worded in full as part of the decision notice for that previous outline planning application. So they've, like I said, there is a decision notice that has been issued there along with a section 106. So with an outline, you then have to submit your reserve matters application. So the outline and the reserve matters are the application, and that is what would then be implemented should sort of both the reserve matters and outline be approved. So in terms of the conditions now, which are set out as part of these reserve matters for the 41 dwellings, they're in addition to those on the outline permission. So it's read together, it's read jointly. So the applicant would need to discharge both of the outline and the reserve matters conditions, ensure that they're all satisfied before the development commences or as worded. So yeah, just to clarify on that, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ramsey.
Comment on that.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to support Councillor Pinnock's recommendation for deferral. I do think there are a lot of loose ends in here. I think there's some positives. The move from 44 to 41 houses, I think that's fantastic. But when things like the parking of visitor cars, we can see that there's 4 there. We understand that. I think there is scope. We saw it really well with a previous application where the police have given us some advice about antisocial behaviour before, and they had a look at that. I think there is some scope to do that. I'd support his motion to defer. Let's move to defer.
Any other members? Councillor Hall.
As councillors, you sit on committees. One thing I do not come here to be barked at and told what I will do. Make that point very, very clear. Sick of this happening. That's all I've got to say on this.
Thank you. So if there's no further members, can we go to one?
Can I just clarify the reason for deferral is for a site visit? Is that correct? Yep. Just for a site visit, or is there any other matters that you wished us to seek clarification on, or any further information?
A site visit would be excellent. I think that would really help us. And if it is possible to speak to the West Yorkshire Police about the crime prevention, designing crime out, that would be really helpful as well.
Just to clarify, we've already consulted them on the application and they've come back with no objections subject to the condition. Just to clarify that they've come back with the condition on the crime prevention measures. So what exactly further would you be requesting?
It's particularly around the vehicles that are going to be unseen and not and in the entrance.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Chair, I was just going to say, I think a site visit would be helpful because although we have had one in the past, there are quite a number of members who weren't on the committee at that point. So they would be able to see the site and the issues surrounding it. So I'd support.
Thank you. We'll go to the vote, please.
Okay, so the vote is to defer for the reasons clarified by Councillor Ramsey. Councillor Hall. Councillor Ramsey.
For.
Councillor Pervez.
For.
Councillor Sheard.
Against.
Councillor Stephen.
For.
Councillor Gregg.
For.
Councillor Pinnock.
For.
Councillor Lawson.
For.
Councillor Hussain.
For.
Okay, so the application's deferred.
Next application is 2021-94364.
The application site is 0.65 hectares in size and is located in the east of Long Lane, Earls Heaton. The site is allocated for housing in the local plan under reference HS45 and has an indicative capacity for 15 dwelling houses. The proposed development is for 16 dwelling houses. To the south of the site is a modern farm complex known as Mitchell Laths Farm. To the northwest is Clough Farm and Clough House, which both originate from the late 19th century. To the northeast are mid-20th century semi-detached properties on Woodburn Avenue. The site's eastern boundary is defined by Chickenley Beck, which runs north to south and is a wooded area that previously accommodated Mitchell Laths Fever Hospital. To the west of Long Lane are agricultural fields. The application site is generally slopes downhill towards Chickenley Beck in the east. The proposed development was originally granted full planning permission under reference 2019-93423 and Strategic Planning Committee on 5th of August 2020, with the decision notice issued on the 23rd of October 2020. The development approved under this permission was for residential development of 16 dwelling houses, which is consistent with the proposal made under this resubmitted application. The rationale for this revised planning application being put before Heavy Woollen Committee instead of Strategic Committee, who decided the previous iteration of this application, is on account of the restrictions placed on subcommittees meeting during the COVID-19 pandemic. The Strategic Committee was being conducted virtually under emergency powers in August 2020, and therefore 2019-93423, despite being a Heavy Woollen subcommittee item, was heard and approved at Strategic Committee that month. As committee meetings have normalised following the relaxation of public health measures, this application, 2021-94364, has returned to Heavy Woollen Planning Subcommittee in line with the Council's scheme of delegation. This slide presents the layout approved under 2019-93423. Members should note the cramped nature of plots 1 to 6, particularly plot 1, being located directly upon the new footway created on Long Lane and the dominance of front of plot parking. This slide presents the amended layout under this planning application, whereby plot 6 is moved to the southern side of the site to increase space between plots 1 to 5 and allow for a reduction in the dominance of front of plot parking. Other improvements to the scheme relate to hard and soft landscaping. Members should note the inclusion of dry stone boundary walls to the front of plots 1 to 6, as well as a stone boundary wall across the southern junction arm, which extends across the boundary shared between the public open space and Spine Road on the southwestern part of the site. A significant uplift in tree planting has also been proposed, inclusive of more planting to the front of plots and within the public open space areas, with native tree planting proposed in the flood risk zone in the eastern part of the site. The previous application was approved with a full spectrum of planning obligations, including 3 affordable housing units, a public open space off-site contribution, a contribution for off-site highway works for footpath improvements, a sustainable travel fund, and an off-site contribution to deliver biodiversity net gain. The previous application was subject to an independent financial viability process, which revealed that the site was not deliverable with any form of planning contribution at any profit level, as the land value would become negative in line with the benchmark land value method for development viability assessments. The independent appraisal result was only provided by the independent assessor after the decision at the Strategic Committee. Fundamentally, the application coming in front of Heavy Woollen Committee today has been submitted off the back of this independent viability appraisal. The main difference from the previously approved scheme is the removal of the affordable housing element from the Section 106 agreement. The other planning obligations previously cited are to be retained despite the independent viability assessment finding that the scheme is unable to justify any financial planning contributions at even reduced profit levels. The reason officers recommend approval of the application, despite the removal of the affordable housing element, is because the applicant's viability submission has already been subject to an independent process conducted under the previous application. Consequently, the situation with this application is somewhat unique in that contesting the findings of the independent assessment would be somewhat futile, given that the assessor's conclusions are impartial. The LPA would therefore be disputing the results of an independent process, and should the application go to appeal, would be unlikely to be able to successfully defend such an approach. The combination of the development value and the abnormal costs new to the scheme's ability to deliver affordable housing gain and the applicant's approach to retaining other financial contributions is welcomed by officers, as these contributions are anticipated to come out of their own profit margin. Prior to members' discussion of the application merits, members are reminded of the wording of paragraph 58 of the National Planning Policy Framework, which states that the weight to be given to a viability assessment is a matter for the decision maker, yourselves, having regard to all the circumstances in the case, including whether the plan and the viability evidence underpinning it is up to date, and any change in site circumstances since the plan was brought into force. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil?
Advisors, and the purpose of my attendance here today is that in connection with this application, we undertook the financial viability assessment on behalf of the applicant. And I thought it would just be helpful just to give you some context in terms of the viability assessment we undertook, and then the review that was then undertaken, which has been referred to by the officer. So at the time of the original approval, there was relatively limited information available in terms of the condition of the site, particularly in terms of technical information, but subsequently site investigations were undertaken by the applicant's consultants, a company called Lithos Consulting, who undertook an intrusive site investigation, and that revealed quite significant abnormal development costs, which were totaling £330,000. And that was the purpose then to prompt a viability review. So at that stage, we undertook a financial viability assessment on behalf of the applicant, and that was submitted in May 2021. It was based on the scheme which is before you now, and we undertook a series of investigations and due diligence in connection with that scheme to look at sales values, to look at build cost, and to review the abnormal development costs in order to present our findings. And part of that exercise is to assess what we call the benchmark land value of the site against which viability is measured. And we assessed the benchmark land value at £240,000, against which we then measured the viability of the scheme as we looked at it. Based on our assumptions and based on the full policy requirement of 20% affordable housing and the 106 contributions, we demonstrated that the site had a value of a negative value of £300,000. We then also looked at the value of the site based on a zero affordable housing provision and a zero 106 contribution, and that still presented a figure of £95,000, negative £95,000. Our report was reviewed by Edison's, acting on behalf of the council, and they concluded, in accordance with our findings, that the scheme could not afford any affordable housing or 106 contribution. Despite that, our applicant has agreed to contribute the policy compliant Section 106 contributions by way of a reduction in their proposed profit level. So on that basis, on the basis that I consider the proposed development with a policy compliant 106 contribution, albeit with a zero affordable housing provision, is considered appropriate based on the viability of the scheme. Thank you.
Thank you. Members? Councillor Pinnock? No? Put your hand up. Councillor Ramsey?
Just an expression of disappointment that we're losing affordable housing. I understand what you're saying about that you're going to contribute from a 106 point of view, but it's really disappointing, is that? And if that's, if that's how it has to be, then that's how it has to be. But it's such a, such a real shame.
Councillor Gregg?
I agree with Councillor Ramsey. It is a shame that there's no affordable housing. Obviously, I think Councillor Firth, who's a ward councillor, has made his views clear that if the costs don't work, does that change given the price rises that we've seen at the moment with properties? And I'm presuming the answer to that is it still doesn't work. But I'd like to ask the question nonetheless, and if that's possible through you, Chair, to do so.
So the assessment is from 2020. So obviously there's been an increase in house prices. However, there's also the Edison's independent assessment took account of and actually correctly predicted the potential for interest rate increases and accounted for a 5% reduction in house prices from a peak. And that's the basis for the gross development value is prefaced off. So obviously, I think it's been the assessment, though it is from August 2020. I'd say the findings of the assessment are still up to date, so to speak, because it correctly predicted the market performance.
Councillor Pinnock.
Thank you, Chair. This is a really, really difficult application to deal with. Those of you who may know where it is, it's at the end, well, not quite at the end of a fairly long road right out in the country, more or less. I know there's development next to it, but in terms of a sustainable location, it's really quite difficult, because I'm not aware that there are any public transport services that go all the way down Long Lane to serve this area. So that puts it at a disadvantage in terms of public transport right from the beginning. It is an allocated site, though, and I guess that during the course of the planning inquiry, its location and its potential for the involvement in public transport will have been looked at, and whether any view was taken as to whether, from a practical point of view, you could run public transport services in a location like this, I don't know. I rather doubt it. But given all that, and given the point that's already been made by Mr. Gilbert in terms of the viability of the site, I mean, I won't say we're over a barrel here, because that's perhaps slightly unfair. Given that we almost certainly want designated sites to be developed, unless we're asking developers to do it for nothing, and I would suspect that developers probably wouldn't do it for nothing. I think that's highly unlikely. I don't think we've got much choice but to recommend approval. That they've done all the things that can be done in order to make the site viable, and to try and have affordable housing. But it just doesn't work, and that's been independently verified on behalf of either side in the equation. With a fairly heavy heart, I would move approval, but it kind of goes against the grain, really. But I don't see what other choice we've got. We could refuse it, and then where would we be? We'd be subject to an appeal, almost certainly. And I suspect the lawyers probably wouldn't allow us to do it anyway, because we couldn't find a reason for refusing it, it being an allocated site. So where do we go, folks? Anybody else got any good ideas? Sorry, I have to put it like that.
Thank you, Chair. It is, as you say, it's an allocated site, and it does have the permission. And what is in front of members today is that balancing decision for yourselves in terms of the lack of the affordable housing that's been delivered. There is, as Richard alluded to, paragraph 58 in the National Planning Policy Framework, which does in regard to viability assessment, and it is a matter for yourselves as a decision maker to decide on that balance. However, I will caveat that there has been an independently assessed, the viability assessment has been independently assessed. So members will just have to be very careful and aware of that matter, that it has been independently assessed. There will be a lack of affordable housing. However, there will be the planning gain in the side of open space, the biodiversity net gain, footpaths, etc. And there will be money into the Sustainable Travel Fund. So as you say, it's an allocated site and those matters would have been discussed through the examination of the local plan. You have your previous planning permission. However, as I said, it is up to members in the balance as decision makers. However, you have to be careful in terms of the fact that it has been independently assessed and considered to be non-profitable with the planning gain.
Thank you. Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Chair. I hear what's been said. I'm in agreement. This is to lose all of the affordable housing is a bit of a kick in the teeth, actually. To be fair, I would have preferred a better balance. I know this has been negotiated by professionals, and we take our lead from them. But still, to lose all of the affordable housing just is I agree with Councillor Ramsay, it's galling, and we've seen it happen again and again. And Councillor Pinnock touched on it. Our hands are tied in this respect, because to go against our regulations is deemed unreasonable, and we can't do that. I'm toying whether to abstain or whether to vote for. That's where I am. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Sorry, just to come back again, just again about, I do understand in the balance it is a decision. However, there is the housing mix. There is 2 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms on site, so there is that housing mix there available. Yes, they won't be affordable units, but there is that housing mix that's been offered on site.
That's understood. There are some positives to come out of this, and the improved layout. That is understood. That's why I'm not pushing at the gate to refuse it. So that's still making my mind up. Thank you.
Anybody else? No?
Just to assist, then I'll second Councillor Pinnock's motion.
So Councillor Pinnock and somebody seconding.
Okay, so the vote is on the officer's recommendation to delegate approval. Councillor Hall. Councillor Ramsay.
4.
Councillor Pervez.
4.
Councillor Sheard.
4.
Councillor Stephen.
4.
Councillor Gregg.
4.
Councillor Pinnock.
4.
Councillor Lawson.
4, reluctantly.
Councillor Hussain.
4.
Okay, so that's passed.
Yeah, that brings us to the end of the meeting, and this was my last meeting, so good luck, everybody. Thank you. Can I take this off?